Hello, it's Duncan Nisbet. I'm here with Keith Klain. Hi, Keith. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Duncan.
Cool. So, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, Keith? For those people who've been living under a rock for the past 12 months?
Sure. My name is Keith Klain. I've been working in software testing for about 20 years or so. And right now I run the Barclays Global Test Center for the investment bank and wealth management. Before that, I worked with Citigroup for a couple years. Before that, worked for the investment bank and UBS for about 6 years. And then prior to that was in a series of consulting and practice-based software testing roles, kind of living and working all over Europe and Asia.
Wowzers. So your role now is in the GTC.
Yes, the Global Test Center. So it's about 800 or so folks spread across the UK, India, Singapore, Eastern Europe, and New York, and we do all the functional and non-functional software testing for the investment bank and wealth management.
Right. Okay. So I bet that has some of its own challenges, does it? Being a global test center.
Yeah, it does. On it's a multi-dimensional problem we're trying to solve. You've got just the day-to-day software testing challenges that come with project work. Meeting all the requirements of the kind of cost, quality, time triangle, and just trying to work out the best way to test software for our projects on a day-to-day basis. Then we've got, highly distributed teams and systems which bring about their own challenges in terms of cross-cultural, different project types, different technologies, and just trying to manage those dependencies and integration points is a big challenge, and it takes up a fair amount of time. And then there's just the general people challenge of finding good people, scouring the earth all the time, and trying to keep them, retain them, attract them, and develop them. And that's a lot what we've been doing over the last, 3-4 years is developing a career path for testers at Barclays to make sure we're getting the best people and ensuring that they're trained to within an inch of their life so they can make good decisions. And on top of all that, I do very much treat running the GTC like a business.
Right.
So we look at it I have a budget. I have, we charge to projects in a manner that makes me manage finances in terms of travel and training and expenses and everything else. So we have a cost base we manage to. It's about a 65 million pound budget I run right now. So with that comes a lot of oversight from finance, from risk and control, from HR, from legal, all the other different assets and facets of running a 65 million pound business for a bank. And that takes a chunk of my time as well. And in the middle of all that, I try as best as I possibly can to be a hands-on manager and get involved in project work without sticking my beak too far in and making a mess of things and getting involved where I shouldn't. So yeah, it's fun. I would highly recommend it to anybody. It's a fun job, and I think particularly at Barclays we've assembled a world-class group of people that I get to spend my time with. So I definitely consider myself a rather fortunate individual.
And you've always got someone to go to for an inspiring conversation.
Absolutely. It's that's kind of the problem. I've had this, as Pradeep Soundarajan would call it, the tiger cub problem. And, James Bach and I have talked about this a lot, is you spend time and energy recruiting really smart people and serious critical thinkers and training people in rapid software testing and context-driven testing. If you're not prepared for the result of just being challenged nonstop and, literally having everything you say questioned, you could be in for a rough time. So yes, I never have to go too far to have someone, I think it's good because it keeps you on your game And I think, I've been accused of kind of liking a fight anyway, so I'm quite happy to argue, just for fun. But you're right. There's never too far to go to, have a challenging conversation.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I guess the advantage of playing devil's advocate as well, you get people to refine their ideas.
Yes, absolutely. And I was, found a great article as somebody blogged about that, I think for Harvard Business Review, about being who is your disruptor in chief. So it's really important to find people in an organization who will challenge your ideas, because a lot of particularly large corporations, which is a bulk of my experience, is very easy to get into bubble land where you're surrounded by people who are either sycophants or generally are aligned towards what you want to do and will tell you things that they think you want to hear, or to try and help you meet your objectives by that very nature of that, aren't giving you objective feedback as best they can. So I think it's really important to find people and let them challenge you, even to just say, what, I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And not take it personally. It's really important. And I think to be successful, like, crucial to have those folks around you.
It's getting the balance right, isn't it? So yeah, there's the constructive criticism, but not taking it personally. Sometimes people do have a personal vendetta, or it seems a vendetta against you. So it's like, hang on, are you talking to me professionally, or are you just personally bashing me?
Yeah, I think, I get that. And I think, testers particularly struggle with that a bit, because it's part of the nature of what we do is critical thinkers, to try and break problems down.
Yeah.
But I do find people are so attached to their ideas that they can't function to the level that they should be able to, because when people hear that they don't like one of their ideas, they translate that instantly into, well, then they don't like me.
Yes. Yes.
And then you're so wrapped up in trying to define yourself by how you think, not recognizing that how you think is made up of so many different variables and dependencies, that any one of them which should be changed would probably pop another idea in your head. And I think, part of it is, the way my parents raised us. And my mom was a English teacher, and my dad was a 27-year veteran cop growing up in the south side of Chicago. We just never really gave each other too much quarter in terms of ideas. You had to really, be able to be teased and be able to not wrap yourself up in your ideas a whole lot. That I think I've never really had a problem letting that go, which has been helpful, because where I see a lot of people not being as successful as they can be is being too wrapped up in defining themselves by how they think.
Right. Okay. And then, yeah, and as you say, you got the people surrounding themselves who agree or appear to agree with what they think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is, the talk I just did about the testing for confidence.
Yeah.
And mentioning Daniel Kahneman, who speaks volumes about it. But people, and even when you do surround yourself with contrarians, trusting them is an issue in and of itself, because, we're naturally attracted towards coherence. So stories that sound like they make sense, even if they're complete nonsense,
Yeah.
are going to be more believable. And then as well, if you are treated and thought of as an expert, your own confirmation bias is going to like the coherence in your stories even more. So it's going to be doubly hard to try and convince that person that they're wrong. So yeah, it's a nasty problem, and requires a lot of diligence. And I even, seek people out. This is one of the things I call the pursuit of scrutiny, right? So seek people out, to just don't take anything I'm saying for granted, and just tear some strips off of my thoughts, right? It's hard to do. You really need to seek it out, because it clarifies your thought process.
Oh yeah, completely. I I put a couple of proposals together for my boss, and I sent it over to one of my peers to have a look at it, and he's completely ripped it to shreds. And even the underlying concept of why. So one proposal is to bring RST in house and get James and Michael over, and the other proposal is to send some test team members to Agile testing days. And
Mm-hmm.
he's just gone, right, okay, yeah, the proposal, these are my thoughts on the proposal, rip that apart. I was like, yeah, okay, good shout. But then the whole thinking behind it is like, why do I think it's a good idea to get RST in? Why do I think it's a good idea to send someone to a conference, for example? And
Yeah.
it's kind of like really fun. And I'm sitting again, in my head, it's obvious. It's like, well, RST, isn't it? It's work.
Yeah.
The
It's really good. And this is, it's super important you should be able to answer those questions. And in fact, I like this, Henry Kissinger analogy where, one of his aides sent him a proposal for something and he just returned it on the top and said, it written, "Is this the best you can do?" And so the aide went and rewrote the whole thing and worked on it, sent it back to him. He returned it back, written across the top, "Is this the best you can do?" The aide went crazy, rewrote the whole thing, turned it in, gave it back to him, and he returned it and said, "Is this the best you can do?" He came back and stormed into Kissinger's office, said, I can't do anymore. This is the best work I could possibly do. He's like, okay, well then give me that one. So I think if you haven't gone through that process, and I think you're selling yourself short, and you shouldn't expect people to accept your half-baked ideas just via who you are, right?
Yeah.
So you should challenge the experts in there. This is one of the things I liked about Colin Powell's rules for management is, challenge experts in their backyard, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to challenge people. And if you can't answer those questions, you haven't thought about it long enough.
Yes. Yeah. So what does he mean by in their backyard? Sort of like turn up.
Oh, sorry. I have a back garden for the.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Like in their home, challenge people in their field of expertise, right?
Yeah.
If you, Griffin Jones really last year turned me on to a deeper understanding of Richard Feynman and reading his stuff, and Michael Bolton sent me some interesting stuff to read from him as well. But really getting under the skin of that guy and how comfortable he was with uncertainty, right? And that, even a scientist, when he's, absolutely sure about something, he's still in doubt, right? Which to me is a window to say nothing, can be truly known, and lots of stuff that we know now, because the window of disproving theories is so long. It's like 50 years for something in the field of science to be thought about critically. So much of what we know to be true now, where is it in that process? Is it halfway? Is it a quarter way? Is it,
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with going at people in their field of expertise, because what we were just talking about, people, one, are attracted to coherence, and two, experts are believed, sometimes just because they have a lab coat, so there's no reason why you shouldn't, question people.
Yeah, I guess certainly people who aren't wrapped up in that context so much, looking at it from the outside, probably have that kind of more objective opinion.
Absolutely. And the context-driven community is no different. There's lots of things we say and accept as fact that are largely unchallenged as well, and I think, the one thing I like about the context-driven community is that asking those questions is kind of the premise, right? So it's okay to do that, and but even there's too much of that even in our own community, where we're not challenging ideas. So we tend to be very, quick to be critical of other communities or schools of thought, without applying that laser-like focus on some of the things we say and do.
Yes, we have a soft spot for it. Yeah. Oh, it's context.
Yes.
Quality. Yeah. So, well, you mentioned it just then about your Eurostar webinar. Do you want to talk?
Yeah,
I watched it. It's lovely. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, and then just the final kind of closing slides for me just really wrapped it up, and you were like, well, we'll get onto that in a minute, but it was so succinct. Do you want to talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about it. So, that was kind of an extension of a blog post I had done a couple, 2-3 months ago, of this idea that somehow one of the missions of testing, or an objective of testing, is to have confidence in either our testing or systems, which it falls into the category of what I would generally refer to as wish thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so this is stuff that sounds like it's true, right? Again, falls into that coherence model. Yeah, why shouldn't you want to have confidence in your systems? Of course you should want to, and of course we should have confidence in our systems, but make that completely alters the whole point of testing to make that your mission. Confidence is a byproduct. It's a feeling that you get subjectively made off of an information set. And if you make that your mission, you're literally intentionally adding confirmation bias into it, which is something we should be on guard against.
Yeah.
And there's some rather, prominent figures in the industry that I believe market testing in that way, that it just keeps popping up. And every time I think it's gone quiet, it comes up someplace else. And it's amazing through some of the conversations that I've had with people, how many testers even believe that, no, I'm trying to give people confidence because it sounds right, and the goal is not to get confidence. It's to get information. And if people feel confident off the back of that, that's great. But if you're going to make that your mission, this is a huge problem. And if one of the examples is this curse of Cassandra, where you give, unheeded, consistently unheeded warnings, right? That if you're going to consistently say things are okay and then they aren't,
yeah,
they're going to come right back down on your head and say, hey, this is the QA firewall or the testing firewall mentality. You said it was okay. You told me I should have confidence. So don't be surprised when they kick your ass when something doesn't work.
Yeah, that's it. Why didn't you find this in test?
Mm-hmm. It's really the essence of that mentality. It's the essence of, so when you're telling people this is okay to go, you are putting your stamp on it that it's okay. And you can, they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can be a stakeholder in the company as a tester, as an employee, but still not muddy your mission as a tester by providing intentionally unobjective information, right? And that was really the point of it. And to try and respond a little bit to some of that nonsense you hear out in the industry, that I call it the echo chamber of the testing industry. Stuff gets, this is the leprechauns of software, right? So, stuff gets said that's unproven, unvalidated, no empirical evidence, but they just kind of bounce around the echo chamber and start to become true because they're repeated enough,
That's exactly right. Yeah, someone just had a ranty blog post, and before you know it, it's fact.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, I'm looking forward to Eurostar this year. I think Michael's done a great job with the program there, and there's going to be a lot of interesting people there. But I think more importantly to our chat is, Let's Test Australia, which I'm very excited about to go to next year.
Of course, yeah. How did you get involved in that?
I can't remember who it was, exactly who it was. It might have been Anne Marie, but I got a call during the last Let's Test when they were putting together the program for next year, and got asked, would you want to do a keynote? And honestly, without even thinking about it, I said yes. And for me, it's, on multiple fronts. One, it's a huge honor to be asked to give a keynote in front of an incredible, dare I say, peer group, because I really think, I was looking at the program last year for Let's Test, and I think I tweeted something along the lines of, it's the best and brightest minds in software testing all in one place. And there's a lot of really, really intelligent and great software testers all concentrated into one area. So to participate in that, and two, to be asked to give a keynote was, to me, in all honesty, a tremendous honor to be kind of, thought of somebody who could add to the dialogue there. And two, it was, I've never been to Australia. So, to help, expand the Let's Test universe, and as well get a chance to go out there and see the country a little bit, was, one of the last places I haven't spent any time. So I was doubly excited to do that.
Cool. Yeah. There's some little voices that are jumping around. When I hear about their testing in Australia, I just get images of Dave Greenless just jumping around saying, "I'm over here. Don't forget about us."
Yep.
Mike talked as well from New Zealand. It's yeah, we're over here. Don't forget about us. So for me, Let's Test over there is just really spreading the community and bringing them under the wing. I think it's lovely.
No, I think, if you look at the context-driven testing community and the conferences that we attend and the style of conferences, and I think, maybe it was you, I have so many conversations, I think it might have been you I was chatting with about, it's important to see how the other half lives a little bit.
Yeah.
To see how, some of the other big conferences run, and how fundamentally different the style and method of interacting with people is. And I think, I've always said I view the kind of factory school and very commoditized testing grip on the testing world as very tenuous. One of the things we're not great about, which is one of the ideas I have for the talk, is how we actually communicate the benefits and the approach to context-driven testing and a more skilled testing in general. And I think with some work and a little bit more coherent and congruent message amongst the communities, you'll see a seismic shift. Would you have thought, even a couple years ago, that something like CIO Magazine would start talking about context-driven testing,
Yeah.
And would accept that as an idea, and there's, I think, even bigger things on the horizon for us. And I think, as, we'll talk about per Scholas in a little bit, but seeing the rapid skill development that the students have had through the context-driven training that we've put them through, rapid software testing, and the way in which we're training them over basically a 6-week period, I think once those stories start getting out and we have a coherent marketing message, or at least messaging around it, because that's one of our biggest problems we've had, I think, in context-driven testing, is that, if you look at some of the factory school stuff, the common criticism is, well, do you have a viable alternative?
Yeah. Can you afford not to?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we do. I think we just, because the nature of what we do is so, the critical thinking, it tends to, and the kind of rugged individualism of all the people in the community.
Yeah.
People just they're not joiners, you know what I mean? So it's, it's hard to, it's like that. I say the Groucho Marx quote, I'd never be part of a club that would have me as a member,
Yeah.
And for years, probably up until the last 4 years, I had been actively monitoring the AST and the context-driven community, knew who James was, had talked to him a couple times at conferences, highly inactive, just didn't want to participate in stuff. And it's really only been over the last 4 years or so that I've been active. So I think, there's lots of people like that. We just got to find them and connect them.
Yeah. And get them motivated to start speaking out as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things that Let's Test I really enjoyed. Well, I guess it comes from cast model, isn't it? The open season at the end of each section. So it allows that critical thinking to come out and people just to say, oh, well, hang on a minute. I want to question that point. And then again, going back to what we spoke about earlier, the person giving the session, it gives them a chance to refine their thinking even further. Again, it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
you leave yourself like, okay, I'm ready for it. I've got 20 minutes of questions. Go for it.
Well, and I think it's super important if you go to, it's a huge difference between allowing for Q&A at the end of a session, which is what typically happens at these conferences, and structuring the talk so that it's not just, if we have time, we'll get to some questions.
Yeah.
You have to stand up there and take questions, right? It's actually part of the time allotment.
Yeah.
And it's not only that, somebody's there moderating that, so to cut you off and start taking questions from the audience. And the thing where I think what I've seen work needs to be done is that even if you agree with what the person's saying, we need to do a better job because if you look at CAST last year, a huge bunch of first timers, right? Even if you're a veteran, you should be questioning people to ask questions that maybe other people aren't ready to ask yet.
Okay.
And there should be, even just for clarifying, because there's a lot of assumption and a lot of confirmation bias baked into the community. So, a lot of people are going to sit around and say, yeah, well, we think, automation is a tactic, not a strategy, and we're all backslapping and feeling good about that. And some people might go, like, what do you actually mean by that? Do you know what I mean? Isn't automation one of the objectives? You know what I mean? And have that conversation instead of just accepting a lot of stuff that we've heard through our own little echo chamber. And I think that I'm looking forward to participating that in a higher level, which, interestingly enough, being one of the keynotes for Let's Test Oz, I'll probably be setting myself up to be completely grilled when I'm there, which is fine. I actually like the discussion part much better than the talk, which is why I think the Eurostar folks were disappointed my talk was only, I think, 28 minutes or something, because I'd rather have a discussion than get up and just talk at people. So
Exactly. Yeah. It becomes a conversation rather than a lecture.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's what I was saying in the proposal. Just this guy was like, saying, well, okay, so there's this session. I found a video on this session. Surely that should do. And I was like, well, yeah, I've watched that video as well. And that's just got me interested to go to the conference to do the session for real. Because then you have the conversation, you get other people's input into it. It just makes the whole experience that much richer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And as well, getting money for your conference dollars, I would, I tweeted that at the last cast. I said, hey, testers, if you're not taking the opportunity to grill these people while you have them in the same room, you're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah.
You should be absolutely grilling these folks while you have the opportunity, because that's why you're there, So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and that's the venue at Let's Test in Sweden. People have commented on this. The fact that you're so remote, everyone stays on site, so you have access. You have access to all the other people, not 24/7, obviously, but no one dissipates. No one goes off into the city to go and do some shopping or something. So the conversation is a lot more richer, apparently, compared to other bigger conferences, I believe. So
yeah, I think that they're built around that. I've been to a lot of the bigger ones, and it's important to go to them to the schools of testing, thought process, or the I think is really important to help people identify different paradigms, but it can also be divisive in a way that's unhelpful when you're not in a school that you like. Right. So it's like, I find a lot of the folks who don't like the idea of schools of testing are the ones who typically get categorized in the kind of dehumanizing, commoditized factory school, stuff. So then that's a useless conversation when I don't like the school you're putting me in. You know what I mean? And then it matters, right? Other than that, apparently it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a key statement for me. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
The school that you've put me in. I remember watching that debate with Doug Hoffman and James Back, and it's kind of like, do you know, so it was on the interwebs a few years ago, and it's like, we've created this, the context-driven school, if you like, has created this concept of schools, and then we're pigeonholing the other people, and you're like, hang on, I don't want to be in that school.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, I
and,
think, there's, having watched that debate, sorry to interrupt.
okay, go.
Having watched that debate, there's two parts to it to me. There's one, if you watch that, people are just having an allergic reaction to the idea of schools of thinking, which I just find nonsensical, right? It's like at one point, James actually says, is the word schools, is that the problem? We're just because we're saying schools, which is the way people have classified paradigms for ages, right? So it's not an unusual thing because there's schools of philosophy, there's schools of science, there's all sorts of different schools. So the idea of schools of thinking is actually very classical in its nature. I think the part of the problem is the way in which it was presented at the time was very divisive. And I get that for the context-driven school wanting to kind of plant a flag and say, look, brilliant marketing for lessons learned in software testing if that was one of the objectives. But, to say, here's who we are, here's our, to delineate, and I think is really necessary to say there's stuff here, this whole hyperscripted, very prescriptive approach to software testing is not, one, testing, and two, there's other ways to do it, and that you need to do that to try and define, to show the differences, right? Some people are so conciliatory, and I liked James' talk he did about ambassadors and people that need to reach across party lines and things like that. I think the people who are pushing the kind of factory school model, in my personal opinion, are generally marketing people. So they're or sales folks trying to move a product.
Yeah.
And so if you look at your big, who are the ones doing it, right? It's either big system integrators that are pushing that stuff, the big vendors that have, 15,000 testers, 20,000 testers, to meet that kind of volume, they have to, that's how the whole mindset behind commoditization. You can define what one means, and then we can stamp it and put it in a manufacturing model and just keep churning out, widgets, right?
Yep.
So to meet the demand of crappy requirements for crappy testing that people, have tried to outsource that and say, I don't understand the problem, which is rule one of something you should never outsource. I don't understand it, so let's give it to somebody else to do, right? And two, it's labor arbitrage, right? So they're just trying to do it somewhere cheaper.
Yeah. And
then three, it's a process they don't understand about what good testing actually looks like. So you've got, dyed-in-the-wool opportunists and marketing people who go, hey, you know what? Yeah, it cost you, X amount to do it in New York. I can add 3 people to the problem and still do it for half the price from Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah.
And that's created some really, really bad behavior. My personal experience from dealing with a lot of these folks and the people who sell that stuff is that if their view, and I've had this conversation with senior folks at a lot of these companies, is that I would ask them, why do you sell me this crap? Right? You come in here and you tell me the stuff I know is not true, and you try and put a nice little button and ribbon on it and give me a dashboard when I know that's not true. Their response typically is, hey, if you guys would stop buying it, I would stop selling it.
All right, yeah. Vicious circle.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and that's one area where I've really tried to reach out to and say, hey, look, there's a better way and more business value focused way to test, So, I think it's, there's the whole certification debate and, the relative value of that, which, I think is just intellectual laziness on a lot of people's part that they don't directly translate the harm that does to the industry to them. And this was, I think we were talking about earlier, is that you and I both make less money because of that crap, right? Yeah. and if people put that together and said, hey, you know what? I don't have as many opportunities, or I make less money because people think my job can be done by trained monkeys. You know, hey, that actually hurts me in the pocketbook, you know? And as James and Michael both said that, you know, they want bad testing to die too, right?
Yeah.
So nobody's afraid of, you know, test is dead. Yeah, we want bad testing to die too, because everyone else has better opportunities and makes more money and has better careers. But those groups have right now a deeply seated vested interest in perpetuating that model.
So with your work with the GTC at Barclays, and obviously you got the global company, have you had any kind of interesting challenges around conversing those countries that typically had a commoditized kind of testing mindset into this, like, no, testing's a thinking game, you're not a commodity, you're not fungible? Have you come across any kind of interesting challenges where the testers typically in that country are, no, just give me some requirements and I'll tick a box?
Yeah. No. So, I mean, speaking specifically about India for us, and it's been an interesting kind of petri dish. So we started most of our context-driven rapid software testing training in Singapore,
Okay.
Which, interestingly enough, the makeup of a lot of the test population in Singapore is actually Indian nationals who live abroad. And in a different context than being in India, they took to it like a duck to water, right?
Okay.
And even when James came out and did the initial training, he was like, oh my God, where did you find these people? These are not the folks I thought we were going to have. And we've been doing a lot of prepping and work with that. When we started the training in India proper and working primarily in Pune, we already had some good case studies for that. But I think the reluctance to question me and the approach, they would say, oh, yeah, you're right, we're going to start, doing session-based test management. Let's do the training and exploratory testing. Without going, hey, I want you guys to push back against that too, right? I want you to, so then you get to some level of ownership that you feel like it's been through your thought process. And then you're like, okay, in this context, ET does work, right? And this is where we should be using it. And so we just kind of shifted from, everybody was really excited, senior management coming out, doing some training, famous tester James coming out and doing some training. And so we just shifted from everybody who was just doing metric scorecards and was gung-ho for that to, it was like the 5-year-old soccer match, right? So we were chasing the ball this way. We just changed it. Now everyone's chasing the ball that way. And it kind of had a little bit, we had a great, leap of interest, and then it dropped considerably because people were going, hey, wait a minute, he's serious. I have to actually think. I have to actually apply myself. And one of the things I made one of our partners do is, from their investment fund, is buy everybody in the 200. I made them buy 200 copies of Lessons Learned in Software Testing, and give everybody a copy, because I said I want to see it on your desk, and then I'm going to go to your desk and I ask if you started reading it. So we actually developed a mandatory reading list for people and put it into their objectives.
Oh, really?
Certain white papers and books we wanted people to read, and their test managers were required to make sure that they had read it to their confidence. So
that's interesting.
You start doing that, and that's the great thing about running a benign dictatorship, right? You can, to a certain extent, you have a lot of latitude to, make people comply to your whims, right? But,
yeah.
but then it took off, and now it's nuts what's going on out there. They've started their own working groups. They've started their own testing and focus groups. They do their own ET workshops. So from that initial, enthusiasm to try and just make the boss happy, to then kind of a dip of, wait a minute, this is actually a lot of work.
Yeah.
To now a real sense of ownership And some of our best work is coming out of India right now. It's amazing some of the things that they're doing around visual test strategies,
Oh, cool.
around heuristic-based test strategies, and there's a lot of value being added there. But it was probably took the better part of a year and a half to get there.
So there is some value in kind of driving learning into people. So I've taken the approach at the moment. I'm doing like brown bags or lunch and learn sessions. There's just a video, so people don't have to commit too much to it. And I want to build that up to like workshops and sessions and things like that. But I'd rather than forcing people, it's just I can say, well, I'm watching these videos anyway. I'm going to book a meeting room, and you're welcome to join me. Did you find that forcing people, or not, is forcing the right word? So here you go. Here's lessons learned in software testing. Read it. Did that approach work well? It sounds like it worked for you.
Yeah, it does for some, and not so much for others. The thing is that, and this whereas I think people, one of the bits around where there's senior test managers are few and far between, is that ultimately I'm running a medium-sized business for Barclays, and at the end of the day, when it hits the fan, they're gonna ring me, right?
Yeah.
And that responsibility means sometimes I'm gonna make this ain't a democracy, right? And yes, I want to take everyone's view in, and I know the NVC people will be all over me for that, but at the end of the day, sometimes decisions got to get made, and if I truly believe that what we're going to do is for the betterment of them, even though they may not know it or realize it yet, or going to help us test better for a company, which is ultimately the goal, because a lot of people have an assumption that their job is some kind of entitlement and not not a privilege that is funded and can be taken away at some point. So being respectful of that, if I genuinely think taking a heuristic-based test strategy as opposed to writing a 30-page document is a better use of our time, and I've got sufficient management backing for that, I'm just going to make people do it.
Yeah, of course. I suppose that element, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one, that's how a lot of advances get done. And now we're 3 years into it, and that becomes the norm, right? And actually I've heard of a few of the folks that, although we have psychotically low attrition in the GTC, a few folks that I know have left and joined other firms are starting to, implement user groups, and they're using mind maps and all other stuff. So, it's not a bad thing. I think so. And sometimes you have to make a call on it, because ultimately somebody's going to say to me, Keith, what the hell are we doing here? And I'm going to have to explain myself and what we're doing. And that I don't have a problem making those judgments, because at the end of the day, if you're being thoughtful and critical and not too attached to your ideas, guess what? You can change your mind. And we were doing it this way. We make small adjustments, but some things have to be done a certain way.
So I guess if you weren't investing in like heuristic test strategy, you'd be investing in another factory school method per se.
Yeah.
So the money's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I tell the folks that, because an interesting reaction that we had when we first started deploying the context-driven testing approach at Barclays was, some of the testers kicked back, and their objection was, hey, this is great while we're here, but if I go somewhere else, how am I going to work in a factory school environment? How am I going to do other things? How am I, I'm going to get trained in this stuff.
Yeah.
And, does this make me commercially viable, which is a completely legitimate concern and question to raise. And I tell them, when that gets brought up, is regardless of where you work, if you follow the techniques that we're going to teach you and the test approach that we're going to employ here, you can always go back to sleep, right?
Yeah.
And you'll still test circles around those people, right? And in some ways, you'll be a much better tester in that environment than they would be. But you can always, take the blue pill and go right back, you hook back into the matrix if you want to. But I don't think you will. I think when you'll have a difficult time checking out once you truly get it. And, one of the things that we did was when I joined, we had 5, was it 8, 7 or 8, 7 or 8 levels of test, description. So we had, or rank. So we had test analyst, test lead, test engineer, senior test manager, test manager. It was 7 or 8 things. And I said, look, we're going to get rid of all that. And we're going to have 3 levels, right? A test analyst, a test manager, and a senior test manager. And people went, oh, everyone's going to quit. You need to be promoting these people. And that first year we had, I think, a 4% attrition rate, because I said, look, we're going to pay you to market.
Yeah.
But I don't want you focused on your rank, So we've got people with 15 years experience their title is test analyst. And my view is, what's wrong with that, right? Who cares what your title is? Are you doing great work? Are you in an environment that's allowing you to use your skills and you can learn and fail safely? Are you doing challenging work, right? I think those are the things that are important, and leading from the front in that is important to kind of set the tone. But I think a lot of this stuff all falls into the myths of managing people, that they care about that. They care about money. You read anything about it, people don't care that. They care about being able to have a living wage. Beyond that, most people don't really care that much about it. They want to do challenging work in a healthy environment.
I do know an example of some guy who's actually into his title, and he wants this lead title, and the money goes with it, and he's not happy that he's not getting it.
But I think that person won't be happy anywhere.
No.
Because you're defining your happiness on external things that are completely arbitrary.
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah. So
you weren't talking about yourself, were you?
So I am that guy I've been testing for 12 years and I'm still a tester. So yeah, the title doesn't mean anything for me. I know I'd mentally checked out of testing before I moved into like the kind of agile role, and then did the RST, and that just reinvigorated the testing for me straight away. It's just like the thought of writing another test specification or test plan or blooming test cases in Excel just made me feel so nauseous. I was just thinking, I need to change careers. So I was looking at that, right, okay, do I make the stepping stone into a developer like everyone else does at the time? And it's just like, no. And then it's just like, right, wow, testing can be different. And then it's like, so then it was an XP team. So I was like, I've been recruited, and you're telling me that I'm not needed. We don't need testers. Oh, really? Right, okay. And then he's just like, and then from day one, you start finding or adding value by dispelling their illusions, as James Back says. And they're like, oh, right, yeah, there is value in a manual tester. Right, okay. And then I did the RST and it's just got more and more efficient. And then just like being able to add value from day one and for your opinion to be heard and to be recognised, it's just immense. It's just like, right, this is what testing is all about. And so the roles I do under that title were more important than the title itself.
Yeah, and people get so focused. The things you're talking about there are like really, Michael Bolton would refer to as test framing and reporting or telling the testing story. And those aren't technical skills, and those aren't, they're context dependent, but they're things that like are so important and really critical to being a good tester. And all that other stuff focus you on just like functional decomposition of systems and writing test cases. And what RST I think really helps you figure out is like, what is the testing problem, right? And how do we articulate that to people? And how do I think about how I'm thinking about things? And that's why I like it so much, is that it reframes the whole problem and focuses you on adding value instantly. Because I use this example all the time that, if I'm talking to our CIO, and he asks me, Keith, I want to know the last critical defect that was found and what the potential impact would have been to our business. And I say, well, the test pass ratio was 89%. You know what I mean? he's not gonna. Yeah, I'll never talk to the guy again. You know, you need to be able to articulate risks to business because that's what they care about, and that's RST helps you frame that, and context-driven testing gives you skills in order to provide that value, which you said you can instantly start doing. That's the great thing about it, is that as soon as you get back to your desk, you can start doing things differently.
Yeah. And I mean, you touched on it there, but we spoke about it earlier as well, the relationship. Everything in software is relationship because there's people using the software. And on the BBST as well, it talks about like, the house is just a load of bricks and mortar, built into a waterproof shape, but actually a house is for someone to live in. And so you start thinking about testing his relationship to the people that are going to be using the software, and you're like, right, okay. And then that just gives it a whole new spin on it.
Yeah, it instantly reframes the whole problem for you, and you start thinking differently about it.
Yeah.
You know, but if you go into it with the mind frame of, you know, this is going to help me, you know, write better test steps. You know, I mean, you know, you that may be a ancillary benefit potentially, but you know that's not what it's about.
So you're doing it wrong.
Yes, you're doing it wrong. Yes.
So with all the training with the GTC, was that a kind of trial run for what you've done at Scholas? So do you want to talk us a bit about the STEP, the software testing education program for Scholas?
Yeah, so that's become a bit of a passion of mine and a few folks as well. And I think, although being involved in the initial stages of it and some planning has really taken on a life of its own. And honestly, I said this at CAST this year when we were talking about it on the last day, Paul Holland and I. People should be incredibly proud of the community that we're in and the way people, just like yourself, have pitched in and helping people, and they're amazing folks anyway. And the whole thing really got started when my CIO at the time, who's still on the Scholas board, we were talking about nonprofits and training during our regular meeting, and he said, hey, you should go out and meet with the Scholas folks and you can go out there and give an industry talk and just give some context to, how you got your job, what you did and what you do, and give people just kind of like a learning through leadership session. And so I went out there and did that and got completely grilled for probably an hour and a half, which was fantastic. They had been reading Barclays, reports, and read my blog, and watched videos of talks I'd given, and were just giving me excellent questions. And I thought, oh my God, with the right training and, an opportunity, I'd hire half the people in this room, if that's their approach to a task,
Cool,
So, what was that?
I was going to say, who were they? When you say
these were students at Scholas who were attending the 15-week training. So every student who goes through Scholas does a 15-week intensive basic technology boot camp. Plus, there's life skills, office skills, professional development that goes along that over the 15 weeks.
Right.
So it's a really intense training period to start off. Then when we started up the STEP training, they have to be pre-selected and then basically handpicked to be on the STEP course. And then they go through 2 days of the introduction to software testing that I teach at Barclays, and then spend a day on a client site actually working alongside real software testers to see what their day's like.
Cool.
Then they start 3 days of RST, and then do a week of RTI. Paul Holland is the principal trainer for that, but it's the same courses that are available commercially.
Yep.
And as well some stuff added in from what we teach at Barclays. And then they do 4 weeks of U-test sandboxes. I was going to say it was previously during the first 2 weeks, QA Symphony and SmartBear have very generously given software to the folks so they can actually get some experience using commercial grade automation tools and test planning and case management tools. And then they do 4 weeks of U-Test sandboxes, which is actually working on real projects from the Scholas lab. So the first cohort is just about wrapping up. So we haven't even finished the pilot course yet, and have had lots of interest in people going on interviews. And I think one of so people like James and Michael and Paul Holland. Lorinda Brandon from Smart Bear, Fumi from U-Test, Josh and Vu from QA Symphony. The AST's given them a year free subscription or membership to the AST. There's all sorts of fantastic folks who have pitched in, aside from companies like LiquidNet with Anna Roisman, who's done site visits and done lectures there on agile testing. There's been all sorts of fantastic people helping out. But I think one of the greatest things about it is that we've started up this mentor program where we pair up a student with a seasoned testing professional from all over the planet. In fact, very few of them are actually in the U.S. to give when these people start real jobs, they've got an outside work relationships with somebody to ask questions that they might not want to ask on the job. And just give them some advice and form relationships. And I think the greatest thing about it is kind of taking a bit of a leap of faith on these folks. And I had an epic long conversation with Michael Bolton one night about, was this all going to work? And we were both pretty convinced that it would. Is the feedback we're getting from people about how awesome the actual students are.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole thing's been fantastic. We've got another cohort starting in November. We've got some relationships we're building with a couple vendors on getting these folks some jobs, because the goal was never to put them through 6 weeks of training and then submit them to JobServe or Monster or that they're never going to swim in that sea. So we need to form a relationship with some folks to give them the opportunity to show what they can do. And we've had people interview with all sorts of companies already. We had one of the testers do an epic 3-hour interview with Google in New York.
Oh wow.
And got through it. And unfortunately, they wouldn't get past their requirement that people have to develop. So they told her to go to Code Academy and learn some Java and then come back. But she started drawing up. They said, well, here, show us how you would test this. So she started drawing up a product coverage map and using a heuristic test strategy model. And they stopped her and they're like, all the people we've interviewed, no one has done that. Where did you learn how to do this? Yeah.
That's, for me as well, you offer the mentor scheme as well is awesome. It's not like, okay, you've done your course, kick you out the door, good luck, thanks for coming. The mentor scheme just keeps that little hook in, doesn't it? It's just like they're not alone. They're kind of there is someone there if they need to.
Yep, and I think it won the incredible response because no one's paid for anything, right? It's all volunteer, and the unbelievable outpouring of response from folks. I mean, we have a waiting list to be on the mentor program, which is amazing as well. But I think, it really shows the strength of the community. And once this gets into high gear and we start, placing some folks and the cohort's been placed and everything else, I truly believe, and everyone laughs at me, I think it's going to be a big game changer for how testing roles are sourced and people are trained. I think there's a real viable commercial model here to say we can take folks from all sorts of walks of life and we could do project work. You could do all sorts of stuff with this.
Yeah.
And I think that will be part of the counterbalance to the 40-question multiple choice test that somehow certifies a competency. We're producing people with, little to no testing experience who are getting interviews with Google and being grilled for 3 hours. I think that's a fundamental difference. No one who took that other certification would get through that, you know?
Yes. I mean, and that's a classic as well. It's like the foot in the door, isn't it? Must have ISTQB. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I think that foothold is so tenuous that just with the right push and a very viable alternative, that stuff will just, they'll either have to fundamentally change so much it won't be commercially viable anymore because they're not structured to offer comprehensive training. You know, even the advanced and expert courses are just exams,
yeah,
right? And the training is still a week. And even though they have years of experience requirements, it will fold like, you know, some of the other schemes that have been developed like that. You know, we're talking people that part of the training is, it's 6 weeks of training, by the way.
yeah.
And it's, you know, they do RST, they do RTI, and then they use those skills directly under the guidance of the UTest folks and James, Paul, and Michael. And they get direct feedback and coaching from those folks on how to test and then use the skills directly on projects. You know, that's fundamentally different,
Yeah.
you know, than coming in and saying, look, you know, she could sit down and draw a product cover match because she's done it multiple times through that training. And
Yeah.
I think that the part one, because it's all nonprofit, so to enter per Scholas is free, right? You apply to get in, and you know, if you meet their criteria, it's free. None of these people have paid for any of this stuff. So that completely takes the floor out of paying for training and paying for an exam, right?
That's it. You can imagine, can't you, in a few years' time, must have STEP
Yeah.
as a kind of a requirement.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that would be a fantastic, you know, outcome if that was part of it. But I think, you know, there's lots of other, you know, ideas around this, and you know, for me, it was really the idea of it was not born out of altruism. It was born out of a commercial proposition. Say, I struggle finding good testers all over the planet.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity to develop a training course, and a program and a whole community building effort to really meet my own very selfish needs.
But I mean, that's one thing I'm having at the moment. So part of the workshops I run include some of the RST material. But what I'm really concerned about is that the message gets diluted. Do you know what I mean? So it's obviously when it's coming from James or it's coming from Michael or it's coming from Paul, they're the first hand, they're the kind of the primary, not what are they called? The primary instructors, aren't they? So they've got it and it's great and it comes from them, you get their energy. When I find I'm doing it with other people, although I try and do it with the same energy, I'm still dissipating it because I'm a secondary instructor.
Yep, yep. Well,
So,
it takes to deliver those courses takes special people. You need to have a depth and breadth of experience to one, give you the credibility to help people to do different things,
yeah,
but two, to answer lots of different questions. So, you know, if you're talking about a skill-based training, you need to actually have the skills to do it. So there's not loads of those people walking the planet. But I also think, having seen some of the RST stuff developed, because we've been intensely using it over the last 3 years, I think some of the work that Paul, James, and Michael are doing right now, in my kind of 4-ish years of working with them, it's gotten tremendously better. It's some of the best stuff they've ever done. I think it kind of dropped off the radar screen, but the testing checking paper should really be a proper paper. That's some of the most advanced and different thinking about software testing that I've seen in a long time. And the work they're doing right now, I think, is some of the best work that I might have ever seen in testing. I really mean that.
yeah,
It's incredible stuff, and the materials that they've produced and the exercises and pushing the per Scholas, turning RTI into a kind of 5-day commercial model that can scale, has forced a discipline on some of the materials that is just turned it into something really great. I really mean that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's it. I really hope it comes off. I want to get the RST on the rock. That's how I'm selling it.
Yeah. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, like, just going back to Scholas, I'm speaking to one of the students, and I'm just so jealous. It's got all this kind of intensive training behind it. It's just like, wow, if I had done RST, I would just be nauseous. So luckily
Yeah.
we can talk about RST. That's fine. And I go, what are you up to tonight? He goes, oh, I'm going to a meetup over in so and so, and then what are you doing tomorrow? Oh, there's another meetup. And basically, he's just having a wild time at the moment, just going to all the geeky meetups that I've just
Yep.
missed out. And I'm like, oh dear. Like, so he was at BDD Exchange last week,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just like, oh yeah, I'm not jealous
Well,
at
they
all.
were able to swing 10 tickets to the BDD exchange.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So they got Perscalis got 10 tickets, and that's the thing that I think has been missing is that the kind of private public partnership around that to, because Perscalis looks at their gig as a business, right? They want to make sure the folks that they have a high placement rate for like the last, I think they've been in business 20 years. It's over like 85% that they find people jobs and they stick in those jobs. So think about getting through 15 weeks of intense technology, corporate life skills training for 15 weeks. It's the people who make that through that are highly motivated,
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so the folks that come out are very, very good. And there's access and, resources available through that kind of private public partnership that if you were just going to do it on your own, like if I was just going to do something like this for Barclays, as great as Barclays can be at times on this stuff, I'd still have to compete against all the other, I'd have to find training budget for somebody. I'd have to,
yeah,
there's all that kind of stuff that comes with it, the bureaucracy that comes around just pursuing it from a private perspective. And if you just did it from a public perspective, then where are they going to get the money from? You know what I mean? So to combine them together has been a really interesting relationship. I was just at a mini conference on this. JP Morgan hosted a company called Year Up, which does internships for disadvantaged folks in all sorts of neighborhoods to work with companies. And Perscalis was there, and we were talking about the STEP training and stuff. This is really becoming a huge thing, finding alternative sources for skilled labor outside of just kind of traditionally trying to hire yourself or go through third parties via outsourcing or systems integrators and things like that. And there, aside from the social good part to it, the people are awesome.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, what's next? What's next for STEP? You've got another course coming in November. Are you making any changes to the course?
No, there's no, other than some mild alterations. We'd have no changes for the course for the second one. We'll take some feedback from the folks about what worked, what didn't work with the training, and then the U-test sandboxes. But for the most part, we're on course to deliver similar-ish training for the second one. Next step is really to get people into some work and finished off some of the partnerships that we've got to get the folks hired and get the next cohort started. And continue on from there. Get another round of mentors lined up, and just keep it going. And I think I've got other grand ideas about how you could build, and I like to call it an urban development center. But instead of doing things offshore, develop project work from a captive in the Bronx. And so there's some commercial models if you look at something like the city of New York has millions of dollars in tech funds that could offset transition costs for moving work back from other countries into urban areas. And, if you look at, I know there's similar programs that focus on this, in the UK, where the Department of Works and Pensions, sells contracts to different cities to give them money to help people find jobs and get off long-term unemployed, or people get off the dole. If you paired that up with training, and I've been talking to a company in Ireland that's done this right now in a small scale, there's opportunities to take this thing internationally as well. I've been approached by 3 countries to get their hands on the training and to see how it goes. So a lot of people are watching how this pans out, because there's folks all over the place who have the same problems that we're trying to solve. So fingers crossed, it's wildly successful, and we start putting people into work, and then we'll take it probably across the U.S. next, and then look at how it could be rolled out globally.
Gotcha. Okay. So I guess the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the energy sounds great from the first cohort. So let's just see how they get into work, right?
As with everything, the proof. And actually, if I can correct you, I think the proof is in the eating. That's probably a good note to end on, Duncan.
Excellent. All right, Keith. Thanks ever so much for your time, mate.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, man. Real appreciate it. We should do this again.
Definitely. It's good to get some inspiring chat on the go again.
Okay, man.
Okay, man. I'll catch you later, Keith. Thanks again.
We'll speak soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Bye.